Hi, friends. So I had a chance to connect with um, my wife yesterday, and we talked to our therapist, who is a truly remarkable person. We have gotten, and I have personally just gotten really incredible work done with him over the years. And what showed up, basically he kind of put a container around some of the experiences I was talking about yesterday, and and managed to kind of alert me to the fact that this really is kind of an existential crisis, to put it mildly. And he was right. He's the word who used the word existential. I'm the one who added the word crisis. But I realized as we were talking about it that that's really what is happening. It's meaning of life stuff. It's big things, and I can tell that there's a barrier because, for example, yesterday, as soon as we got on the call with our therapist, I had this, it was kind of like, okay, well, Katie and I were both there. We had just had this big conversation the night before. Clearly, this was like gonna come up as a possible thing to talk about, and I was like, no, don't. And I was like angry. I was like, I had an internal sort of defensiveness flare up that basically was like, I don't want to talk about this. I don't know what to say. Go away. And that wasn't the response I initially had when I was talking to Katie, but it was definitely available to me as an approach. And there were a number of things that our therapist said that were really helpful in framing how I go forward. I think it's really helpful to identify that anger. That was something that actually showed up yesterday in meditation. I was sitting in meditation and I realized, I think I talked about this yesterday, I had this kind of violent fantasy thing. And then beyond that, there was this feeling of kind of bubbling rage, simmering rage right under the surface. And it creates, if I can stay with it, and so then it was really interesting to see what happened on the call yesterday as I just didn't allow myself to say, no, I don't want to talk about this, which there was ample room made by everyone else to say, hey, this might not be the time to talk about this. Maybe there's no harm in it. There's a right time for drawing out, for really putting focus on this kind of event. There's not necessarily a right time, but if there's hesitation, there may very well be a reason, and there's no need to go into it, and that gave me a little bit of space to say, well, not that I'm it's not actually that I don't want to talk about this. In some ways, when we have a sort of existentially significant event happening within us, it would feel great to talk about it. It's just, I don't really know what to say. How do I actually articulate what's happening? And I could tell, another telltale of the fact that this is a big thing for me was that it was hard to keep my focus on it. I'm on post 580 something. I do self-reflection all the time. It's what I do. And yet this thing was it was not impossible, but it was very hard. It was kept trying to run away. I kept trying to run away. I didn't want to hold it in my awareness long enough to really see it. So one of the things that our therapist said was, it's supposed to feel overwhelming. An existential crisis is supposed to be overwhelming. So there's nothing wrong with it feeling really big, which is a nice first thing to hear, first thing to remember when things get really intense. Another thing he said was, a little later in the call, was, really, make some plans. In other words, schedule some time, basically, to look at this and work with it, because otherwise there's a difference between putting it down. I was talking about how I immediately had to run off and go pick up on Elise and go to school and do a bunch of stuff, and it was very clear I was going to transition out of that moment of connection with this event. And he pointed out that I could make that transition consciously. In other words, decide to put it down for a while with the intention to come back to it, which is very different than the habitual pattern of putting it down as a way of avoiding it, or putting it down just unconsciously, subconsciously, to avoid the pain of it. Because if it's unconscious, then you're just kind of like, there's a door open. An existential crisis is an open door. It's a moment when something has the potential to change. And we don't want to waste that opportunity. Certainly, as I look at my life and what it feels like to be kind of trapped in this way, I don't want to waste an opportunity to move through it. But that requires making some pretty conscious choices about how I'm going about it, and when I'm looking, and then how I look away to do the rest of my day becomes a really significant action. Because if it's not pretty conscious, then my subconscious will take over and just avoid, and I'll be in distraction before I know it. So those are my main takeaways. And to enlist people who can help with this. A bunch of stuff comes through. It's probably not the last you'll hear of it. But in a weird way, it feels almost good to be acknowledging something in me that feels scary and big and overwhelming and not under control. Because acknowledging it is the act of not pretending it's not there. So in and of itself, that already contains a kind of centeredness. There's a strength there that I can claim. So yeah. Thanks for watching, folks. Appreciate you. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you tomorrow.